To call him a multifaceted personality would be an inadequate description. He's a painter, a filmmaker, a designer, and very possibly he has the largest collection of Urdu books to be found in Lucknow. So how should one describe him? Well, I leave that to you to work out for yourself as I introduce you to the one and only Muzaffar Ali. Welcome to the program, Muzaffar.
Thank you.
Let's start with the project you've been working on for 2 years. I know it's all terribly hush-hush, but am I right in saying that it's a film that could involve stars like Antonio Banderas, Daniel Day-Lewis, and even Al Pacino?
Well, it's a very big dream, and it's a dream to bring the world together, to build bridges between the East and the West, and basically to soften the hearts of the world.
But these three big stars are part of that dream.
Well, they are part of a very big, I would say, communication idea, and what should I say, and a great artistic endeavor. You know, I think we have to sculpt thoughts and concepts and feelings through icons who are known to the world, you know, and very sensitive thoughts, very beautiful thoughts, very intense thoughts of human relationships between the Guru and the Shishya.
Let's talk about those thoughts, because the film, I believe, is based on the life of the Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi. Who was Rumi, and why are you making a film on Rumi?
See, Rumi is really today somebody who lives within your heart. He's a man who's made the journey of the mind to the heart. He was a great scholar, but when he met Shams Tabriz, who ignited the fire of love in his heart, so he made that transition from the mind to the heart.
But is he known? Do people know Rumi's poetry?
Well, today he's the largest selling poet in America.
Really?
Exactly. And in India also there was a time when people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, they all studied Rumi, and they were great lovers of Rumi.
So the interesting thing is that America knows Rumi very well, but India that did know Rumi in the 19th century has forgotten him.
Well, to a great, I would say yes, you're right.
Now Rumi, of course, is part of the pantheon of Sufi thought, Sufi music, Sufi poetry that you're very attracted towards. For those of us who don't know it and understand it, how would you explain the attraction of Sufi thought for you?
Well, Sufi thought, in a very brief definition, is something which melts the heart. It's a thought which helps you to submit and surrender to the will of God, to His creations. And around these few concepts, there's a whole range of poetic combinations, permutations and combinations that have evolved, with beautiful rhythms, with beautiful sounds, with beautiful arrangement of words, similes, metaphors. And Rumi was the pioneer of this. In fact, he gave Persian a new fragrance with that, with these concepts.
So when you make this movie on the life of Jalaluddin Rumi, are you looking to melt hearts in the 21st century? Is that the hope?
That is really the communication and the artistic objective of the film, to melt hearts, to create dialogue amongst cultures and faiths, among civilization. See, when Rumi died, the Christians were weeping, the Jews were weeping, the Muslims were weeping, the Zoroastrians were weeping.
And this is a movie that you hope will have the same effect. It will bring humanity together by sharing in their tears.
Exactly. Oneness of the human race in a world without walls.
Is this then your new dream project?
This is my obsession, it's my mission, and I'm all the time just thinking of Rumi, reading Rumi, talking to people who love Rumi.
But you know, 12, 13, 14 years ago, you had a very different dream project. It was called Zuni. The names may be similar, but it was really very different. Sadly, because of what's happened in Kashmir, Zuni never got finished. How upsetting for you was it, and how uncertain does it make you feel thereafter?
See, I've got detached about it, but inside I am nursing an unfinished poem. It's really a very, very sad thing inside, but when I compare my plight with the plight of the people of Kashmir, it's pale in front of that.
But there is a small sense of hurt within you.
The enormous sense of hurt. It's really 10 years of my life which I've spent in, maybe more, 14 years of my life, in which कहते हैं दो आरज़ू में कट गए दो इंतज़ार में, उम्र दराज मांग के लाए थे 4 दिन, दो आरज़ू में कट गए दो इंतज़ार में. So in falling in love with the subject, evolving the subject, making it halfway, and then dreaming to finish it. I mean, it's a very intense journey within. You know.
It was meant to be the story of the Kashmiri 16th century poet Queen Haba Khatun. Was it a film with a message?
It was a very intense film with a very intense message. It was a film about the plight of a woman, the film about the sensitivity of a woman. It was a film about the culture of the valley, the history of the valley, and in itself a beautiful story, you know, which had a beautiful beginning, a middle and an end.
You said of Zuni, and I'll quote, if Zuni had been completed, the history of India would have been very different. Were you exaggerating or did you really mean it?
Maybe I was understating, but it would have definitely changed the history of filmmaking in India, because this was the first time we were attempting to make a global film with an American writer, with 2 negatives, with a Japanese composer, and all kinds of very interesting things.
So this was a film that could have won awards from the Oscars to Cannes?
Well, it could have at least definitely been considered, because it was a novel subject. It was a
Would it also have changed the way we see Kashmir today?
I would say that, because it would have been a very beautiful way of understanding the people of the valley, their culture, because Kashmir is a landlocked region, you know, and the Kashmiri, the Kashmiri peasant especially, he feels secure crossing even the Banihal, you know, so he's, to understand what makes him tick, what makes him feel.
Zuni would have been that interpretation that we never got.
Zuni would have been that, what shall I say, medium to reach his heart.
Muzaffar, will you ever finish it? Your 2 chosen actors, Vinod Khanna and Dimple Kapadia, are now older, fatter, definitely grayer. Can they redo it for you, or is this dream going to remain a dream?
I think, well, it's very difficult to do it in the present format with them. You know, maybe we can have some other treatment, but when there's a will, there's a way.
That will exist?
I think the Kashmir government has also to exercise this will, because they are partners in this.
But are you determined?
I have to finish this film at some point, in some way. I have to take 12 years of my life to the people, you know, and
you can't leave 12 years hanging in the air.
I have to give account for that.
Now, of course, if there is a film that the world knows you by, it's obviously Umrao Jaan. They call it your greatest, your best film. Would you accept that judgment?
Well, you know, when you make a film, you're so intensely involved with it that you don't look at it as a great film. You look at it as a intense expression of what you're going through. And I think all my films reflect some part of my life, some part of the history that I've experienced.
But did you succeed with Umrao Jaan in saying and doing what you wanted to say and do?
When I was making it, I knew that this film is going to get into people's bloodstream, you know. And that kind of feeling comes when you're in the middle of a film, and this was happening with Umrao Jaan. And I was trying to convey the story of a helpless girl of the mid-19th century and the forces of society around her, and how that helplessness was finding creativity, a source of expression, a way of expressing her identity.
Let's talk about this helpless girl, because you cast Rekha in that role. Most people say that the greatest surprise when they see the film is that you found depths of talent in Rekha that they didn't know existed. Did she surprise you?
Well, she didn't surprise me, but she lived up to what I thought she could do, you know, and she did that. And see, what happens in a film is that you have to construct moments, and you have to have a vision, and then you go back from the vision to moments. And with those moments, as far as Rekha is concerned, I was just sculpting with her eyes. You know, I found those eyes had that grit, that sensitivity, that vulnerability that Umrao Jan was all about, you know.
It was her eyes that attracted you to Rekha?
Yeah, and I didn't want to see anything else. I didn't want to know anything else. I hadn't seen any of her work, and I have not
You've
seen
never seen any of her work?
And I have not seen anything after that.
So it was the eyes and eyes
It was
alone
just those
that convinced
eyes
you?
and Umrao Jan, and that was the beginning and end of Rekha for me. You know?
Was she difficult to direct? She was at the very peak of her popularity. Did that make her daunting, or did that make her much easier to handle?
See, when I direct a person, I submit to the person. I don't boss or anything. I just try to bring that moment alive that character is all about. And it's my preparedness, it's my organization and mental clarity about the mise-en-scene, the shots, the lighting, the camera, all that has already worked out. So at that moment I'm only working with her eyes, whereas everything else has been fully orchestrated, you know.
You know, it's interesting you should say that, because people say the most important thing about Muzaffar Ali as director is the work he puts in behind the scene. Is it true that almost every scene you shoot, which looks like a work of art, has actually been sketched by you very closely before you shoot it?
See, that is the beauty of this medium. It's the greatest medium of the world, and even when I'm not making a film, I'm working on each of those mediums independently, singularly. Like when people say that you're a fashion designer, I'm working with craft. I'm working with what people are going to wear. Or when, as far as music is concerned, now music is a very, very important aspect
It's
of
not
a character.
incidental to you?
No, it takes 2 years to do music for a film, because that character has to come alive. The lyrics have to come alive. They have to be part of the screenplay.
So the actor at the end of the day is part of the preparation that goes into
Exactly.
creating lighting, atmosphere, clothes, music, the works.
Words.
The other comment they make of a Muzaffar Ali film is that there's one theme that runs through them all, starting with the Gaman. It's the theme of helplessness, the theme of the individual, in a sense, alone in the world. It's sadness. Would you accept that?
Well, you know, actually, that is really what propels me to make a film, the human sadness, and that is what draws me to a subject, to a character, to a milieu, to a culture. It was the sadness of Kashmir that pulled me into Kashmir. You know, there was a certain kind of sadness. There was sadness of Awadh that pulled me into Awadh. There was sadness of Bombay about that taxi driver that pulled me into that film. You know, so, but through that sadness, you're trying to create a kind of a poetry of the heartbreak of the human situation, both in town and country, and in time and history. You know, and
are you temperamentally drawn towards sadness and heartbreak? Do they move you more than their opposite feelings of happiness and laughter?
No, when I'm making a film, there's only one vocabulary we have, that is only laughter, you know. I mean, I work with only humor, you know. But when you are dealing with a subject, it has to be very intense. I mean, my sadness is of a different kind. It's a poetic sadness. It's a romantic sadness.
But that intensity you look for comes in sadness.
That comes from the sadness that is there in Urdu poetry, you know, maybe.
Let's take a break, Muzaffar. Let's turn in part 2 and talk about you. Let's explore your personality and see if there's sadness there, which perhaps is the motivation that drives the artist in you. We'll be back in a moment's time. Don't go away. Welcome back. My guest is the filmmaker Muzaffar Ali. You were born a couple of years before independence into the Kotwara royal family, and you often describe yourself as a child of Lucknow. What sort of childhood did you have?
Well, you know, Lucknow was going through a lot of turmoil when I was, gaining my senses, and we had just seen the partition, and we had seen the abolition of the Zimmedari, and it had the hangover of the 1857 mutiny, and all that came with the aftermath of the mutiny, which was the erosion of a culture, the erosion of a language.
Are you saying that there was a lot of history and sadness that were part of your childhood?
Certainly, I think anybody who woke up in that period has experienced that sadness, and it's just that maybe I felt it differently and I expressed it differently, maybe through my parents or whatever, but certainly that was a very different period of our.
So is there a real sense in which the sadness that drives you as a filmmaker was something that you imbibed in the atmosphere of Lucknow as you were growing up, that understanding of it and that intensity of it?
Yeah, certainly. I think there was a very, very strong sadness in the atmosphere, and I was trying to rise above it through my antics and pranks and things like that. But inside it was a very sad period, you know, and coming from a feudal family, I mean, your standard of living also changes when the Zimidari was abolished and all kinds of other social
So you
and
experienced it
cultural.
personally in your own changing lifestyle?
Yeah. And besides that, I think the erosion of the culture was very strong.
Now,
I
if
could feel that.
Lucknow and the erosion of culture, it's a very evocative phrase that you use, was one of the influences that worked on you. You've often said that the Calcutta where you got your first job was another very happy but influential experience. Why was Calcutta so important?
I think Calcutta today is one of the greatest living cultures of India. And people like Rabindranath Tagore, Mrinal Sen, Satyajit Ray, I mean the living people and the dead people who have gone by. I mean, they've tried to look at society and the environment in a very creative way. You know, they've tried to express things in that.
So it was the creativity of Calcutta that captivated you?
Yeah.
Except that you were working at the time with an advertising company and they were barely paying you 150 rupees a month. I mean, did you have the time and the money to be creative?
Well, I didn't have many expenses, you know. I was staying in a hostel where I was getting my food, you know. So 150 rupees I used to pay the hostel. So I just used to spend, and it was very near my office. So I just enjoyed being with people, and there were a lot of very creative people there. Subhash Mukhopadhyay, he was a great poet. He was working there. There were a lot of very intense people in Clarion at that
It's
time.
in Calcutta that your fascination with film first really began and sprouted. To what extent were you motivated by the fact that Satyajit Ray was in fact your boss at Clarion McCann?
Well, he was an awesome person, I mean, very inspiring, and everything he said made a very deep impact on you. I mean, you could feel that he was, when he was talking to you, he was etching ideas on your mind, you know, maybe alien ideas, but you could feel the intensity of
Did you ever work with him on his film? Did you learn from him?
I used to go and spend time with him, you know, I used to go to his house and sit with him and watch him work. But I didn't work with him because I was supposed to be an account executive, you know, so I was dealing with clients.
You were one of those rare people who moved from the finance side to the creative.
From the artistic side.
Tell me something else. It's also in Calcutta that your painting began. Was painting a response to Calcutta or an escape from it?
No, painting I was doing right from the beginning as a child, and I used to get an art prize in every year in my class. And when I was in Aligarh, I painted, and when I went to Calcutta, I painted more because I had, couldn't do anything else. I had that little room, and I just painted maybe, and I sold some paintings which kept me going also.
Your first exhibition in Calcutta was almost a complete sellout, wasn't it?
Yeah, in '68 at Academy of Fine Arts.
You said somewhere that painting is my private life, filmmaking is my public life. Is that still the case?
Yeah. I think filmmaking is a totally different medium altogether, and painting is a very intense medium in the sense that when I did an exhibition in '72 in Bombay, and that's a time when the feeling for Gaman was being born in me, and I felt that that feeling couldn't be expressed in painting. It had to be expressed in celluloid, and all my recollection of what I had been through in Calcutta began to become relevant when I was thinking of Gaman, and I was just finishing painting. I mean, painting I still continue. I paint a little bit every day. I sketch a little bit every day.
Now, in the 1990s, you did something very different to painting and filmmaking. You dabbled in politics, first at the Vidhan Sabha level and then at the Lok Sabha level. Why did you do that?
See, my father was always in politics. He was an independent member. He fought the first election in 1936. But regardless of all that, I kept away from politics. And when the Babri Masjid was demolished, I saw a lot of tension. I mean, unprecedented tension between the Hindus and the Muslims.
So this was your attempt to reach out and help?
I wanted to just find out how much was whipped up and how much was real, and I wanted to basically cement society. So I wanted to go to the people and check out and tell them that this is not the way to be and behave. You know, in fact, there was a seminar in Delhi, in Bombay, in Lucknow. The subject was 6 December ko kya toota. And at that time I said, you know, 90% of my friends and relations are Hindus, you know. If you take them away from my life, I'm left with only 10%. So how can I live as a 10% human being in this society?
Do you value that experience of the 90s, or do you now, looking back, regret that you actually entered the political arena?
No, I value the relationships I've made. I value the knowledge I've gathered at the grassroots level, the kind of problems that exist. In fact, I've fought from Lucknow up to Tarai, up to Nainital.
But the reason I ask is because you've also said that I was used by politicians.
Well, I've not said that, but somewhere people feel that maybe I should have, you know, when it's the voice of the people, you know, I don't look at things like that. But definitely it was a very enriching experience for me.
Even though you didn't win either of the 2 elections?
I think I'm glad I didn't win any election, because the situation there is really bad, you know, in terms of what you can do for people.
When you say you're glad, are you saying that you're glad you didn't actually become a politician? Being in politics is different.
Well, maybe my creativity would have suffered, and I feel I can reach out to people more accurately, more intensely, more sensitively through my art than I can do through politics.
Certainly Rumi would never have been even thought of if you'd gone and become a politician.
Exactly.
So it was a near miss.
Well, it's for the better.
Muzaffar Ali, a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you for this interview.
Thank you.